Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see your faces today. Again, I'm beginning to recognize some of you. Um, I'd just like to make a couple of opening sort of housekeeping comments. Today, you will be muted during the presentation. We will not have a breakout small group session time today because we have a lot of content to cover. And so we will go through our whole presentation, and then the time at the end, we will have large group discussion. And I know that the breakouts are important for networking. You've had a couple of opportunities to do that, and I know that you'll have some more, but we just have so much to cover today that we thought this was a better way to approach this content. And then we will be staying on that extra 30 minutes at the end. So hopefully that large group discussion will be fruitful for you.
Well, good afternoon. I'd like to, again, this is Elise Cadez, assistant to the lead of the current triad leadership of the Oblate program. And today, Jane Somerton, the lead coordinator, myself, Nadine Grady, connections coordinator, and again, Debbie McCoy, our formation coordinator, will be doing today's presentation. And as always, as Benedictine says, we'll start all good works, and I think this is very much a good work, with prayer. On meeting a stranger, with respect and reverence, that the unknown between us might flower into discovery and lead us beyond the familiar field, blind with the weed of weariness and the old walls of habit.
All right. So what you're seeing now is the current model of our Oblate community. And what I'd like to do is just give you a few minutes to look at it, sort of, hopefully it's large enough that you can all see it, and spend a little bit of time just looking at where the lines go, who is connected to what. And this is not in as much detail as it will be eventually, but this is pretty much what our community, kind of a visual representation of how we are managing our Oblate community. So it's important to note that each member of our community is also a member in within one of the 9 dispersed Benedictine communities. Most of our Oblate community members are oblates or inquirers or novices. However, we have a few who are not. And so the groups are a little different, and the makeup of the groups is different. Elise?
Yes, thank you. So to talk just a little general information about the dispersed Benedictine communities, and being 9, there are all kinds of different makeup, like Jane indicated. I will give you an example of the community I belong to, which is in the Lewiston area. We have sometimes up to 16 members that come to the meetings. We do meet only in person. It's not worked for our group to do either hybrid or Zoom, but for some groups that works very well. Our group meets once a month, September through June, and as a group, we decide what we will study that deals with some aspect of Benedictine history, culture, the rule, and then we study that for the year. We have had different members come in from other areas, and welcome them. Some of the communities are only Zoom, a few. Some of them are a hybrid, and currently that works well for them. And It's just a real benefit to do that. And if you follow the lines from our dispersed community, it leads right to our uh, lead little bubble, the lead and assistant. It leads to the connections. It leads to the formation. So we're all connected. And then out of each community of the 9 dispersed, one person is selected. It could be the current community lead, which then reports to the Oblate Council. The Oblate Council meets quarterly. We bring information to them about what the group is studying, how it's working, if we have new members or inquirers, and just do a general report to the council from each group.
Thank you, Elise.
You're welcome.
So also, what I'm going to do now is continue to address sort of the areas that the lead and the lead assistant are the primary liaisons for. And so one of those is what we call our concilium. And this is a council that meets. It's a group of our mature, experienced oblates that I asked and then appointed to be a part of the decision-making at structural and organizational levels. So how do we take who we were even 5 years ago and look at that and move ourselves into the future? And this is the group of wisdom people in our community that are working on this. They are very skilled advisors. They are skilled in organizational and structural design, people that came from professional backgrounds and experienced in leadership, and they're steeped in Benedictine spirituality and prayer. And so they really do help guide us. And when I look at this, this is the fruit of the work that they were doing a year ago. The other main liaison for the lead and the assistant is to the monastic community itself. So the lead coordinator meets once a month with the monastic ministry committee. Oblate is considered at St. Gertrude's to be one of the primary ministries, and so we're a part of that at this time. Let's see. And you know, we we should probably have lines between lead formation and connections. That's where the heart goes right there. It's the center of our community, and so we just kind of are hoping that we can use this model to continue to explain to ourselves and help us articulate to others, kind of where we're going and what we're doing. And triad, I forgot to say, is so the triad methodology of leadership is something that we borrowed from a healthcare model. And most people may be more familiar, if you're in healthcare, with a dyad model, a balanced model of 2 people, one on administrative side and one on clinical side. But there's also a triad model. And so we borrowed that. It's a balanced team of 3 individuals whose gifts, skills, and experience enable the team to function effectively and efficiently. And in our case, they must be people that are steeped in Benedictine spirituality and prayer, clear understandings of leadership, experience in leadership, and trusted by the community. Nadine?
All right. Oh, and by the way, Jane, that connection between the three of us in the triad is what that big light colored circle was about.
Amen. There you go.
Trying to keep the number of lines to a minimum. So
Yeah.
we're kind of just part of that whole circle. But I am the connections coordinator, and as you can see, I've got, my line to the dispersed communities and communicate with them. I also communicate with the monastery primarily to the business office to get reimbursements for expenses, and also the development office when they want data from our database and, addresses and names and so forth. I work with a team to produce the quarterly newsletter, which goes out by email, and a person who has volunteered to be archivist, take care of our historical records, and another person who is a steward of our gift giving fund and our memorial stone. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. I work for the retreats. Notice that these three things down in the lower left corner are all retreat related. I work with a team that does hospitality as people arrive for retreats and also for our social time. And I also work with the Spirit Center, which is the facility at the monastery where we hold retreats, in terms of their technology, making sure that we have what we need for hybrid meetings to work smoothly. And I will pass off to Debbie to talk about formation.
Okay, so I am the formation coordinator, and what you see here is a lot of it is focused on the retreats themselves, the content teams, and I'll be getting into that a little bit in more detail in a minute. But that is part of my role, is to design and implement the retreats and to work with the teams that are facilitating those. And as such, I also am in direct contact with the Spirit Center staff, because that is who we work with that's the facility that we use. And you can see also it relates back to the 9 dispersed Benedictine communities, what we used to refer to as our local area communities. And I may slip up and call them that occasionally, but we're looking at a model where somebody from each of these communities is also focused on formation, and then we as a larger group work on formation altogether. Moving into a little bit more detail on my role as the formation coordinator, one of the biggest pieces of that for me is to coordinate retreats with the Oblate leadership team. And so I am responsible for planning and implementing 2 retreats per year. We do the spring discernment commitment retreat and the fall formation retreat. And I work then with a retreat team who is responsible for planning and implementing that. Generally, we try to do a retreat director formation retreat in the fall. That's a little easier to work with a smaller group. And then we have our commitment retreat in the spring, where we need all hands on deck, so to speak. And I'm also responsible for scheduling and offering inquiry days twice a year, again, with a team who has put that together. We used to do our inquiry days where we would invite guests and potential inquirers to join us at the monastery, and we would introduce them to the monastery itself. They would get to meet the sisters, some of the oblates, and we would talk about what Benedictine spirituality is, and we get a chance to pray together with the sisters. We've now moved to strictly a virtual way of doing that, which is a little more challenging, but it is kind of our first step in incorporating new members into our Oblate community. And so I've kind of broken out the formation piece into what I'm calling initial formation, which is, for example, coordinating the formation of our inquirers and novices. And I facilitate the assignment of mentors to novices. and then I provide assistance and guidance for those Oblate mentors. Just recently, a team worked together to update our mentor guidelines. So we're trying to make it a little more clear what exactly the role of a mentor is in regards to our Oblate formation. And then we move into ongoing formation. And so that is part of what I do in that role, is to maintain regular communication with the dispersed Benedictine community leaders. And as I mentioned, hopefully there will be somebody at each one of these communities whose role is also around the topic of formation. I support mentors and community leaders in formation activities ongoing. I coordinate development, implementation, and review of the Oblate Continuing Benedictine Formation Curriculum. And I'm also responsible for formation sections of our Connections for the Journey Community Manual. Now, when we talk about formation, I think there are several different perspectives about what that term actually means. And so we're going to show you in just a second our little, we call it, there we go, our 4-arrow diagram, which kind of looks at the process of becoming a member of this community. And so initially, the guest is a person who's becoming familiar with the community. They don't know yet if they're planning to continue or not, but this is essentially a stage of information. They're learning who we are as a community. They are learning about Benedictine spirituality, the rule of Benedict itself. It's, to put it in a short way, it's sort of head knowledge more than it is anything else. Then as we move on to the next stage, an inquirer then begins that process of what I'm referring to as incorporation. It's essentially what I think in the past, our thought has been that this is what formation is, being formed into an oblate. You learn about the community, you are doing more study, etc., and becoming then a member of this community. So our inquirers attend an inquiry day and they make a choice as to whether or not they want to continue moving along this line, and they continue coming and joining these dispersed Benedictine communities in their basically their monthly meetings. And then an inquirer can move on to the next stage as a novice. And this is something that happens basically once a year at our discernment commitment retreats in the spring. And this is where real formation activities begin. We have, you'll notice the little green star there. Any oblates that we have that are transferring from another monastery would enter this process step at this level. And essentially what this is, it's formation. It's a time of building relationships with the oblate community, the members, and trying to discern if our community, which has a little different flavor than others, if this is a good fit for them, and if we feel that they are a good fit for our community. So we get to know each other, and then there's a decision made as to whether or not they choose to transfer their oblation. And then I think the one we're focusing more on these days, and it's even I don't know, more, now I can't say more important, but it's continuing as an oblate into deeper and more transformation that happens as a result of truly living this Benedictine spirituality. We're encouraged to continue this lifelong learning of that basically changes us. If we're doing it right, the goal of formation is to become transformed on a very deep and fundamental level, and then to take what we've learned and those gifts and to share that with the wider community. At this stage, we're engaging daily in those Benedictine practices. We reflect on how we're living those practices. Prayer, Lectio are a couple of really central practices we continue to nurture as we move forward. Our sister Teresa has developed for us a 5-part Benedictine formation series that helps us all to dig deeper into the rule itself, which is obviously the heart of Benedictine formation. We're encouraged to learn how to read the rule, not necessarily through the eyes of someone else's commentary, but for ourselves as modern people. How do we take what Benedict wrote many years ago and put that into action in our daily lives? And in Sister Teresa's words, the Benedictine monastic way of life is designed to help us do as what the Apostle Paul called growing into the full stature of Christ. This is not about acting differently, acting better, but actually becoming a better person, being changed on a fundamental level, becoming more like Christ. And this type of transformation that we're discussing here, this is the goal of our Benedictine journey.
Thank you, Deb. And I will give you some overview of what I do as the connections coordinator. I've broken this out into 3 chunks because I have a lot of varied responsibilities here. One large group is things that encourage connections within our community. So I do manage our website, including the calendar and the email forums that people use to communicate birthdays and prayer requests and announcements and other day-to-day email communication among the whole community. As I mentioned, I lead a team that produces our emailed newsletter once a quarter. And you're going to see this in all 3 of us have our role in maintaining our community manual, the Connections for the Journey, and making sure that that's up to date and everyone has access to a current copy of it. I coordinate the on-site greeting and hospitality functions at retreats and the technology needed for hybrid retreats. I would like to have a team to help with that technology, and we were just about to the point that we had it nailed down and we were going to start training a team, and then we changed our equipment. So we started over with our last retreat. It was the first time we'd used the new equipment, and hopefully after we do a couple retreats and get that under our belt, then we'll work on developing a technology team. And minor thing is to maintain our put and take library that's available at the retreats for people who want to either donate or borrow books. Second, I've got a group of duties that have to do with records. I maintain our database of our members and newsletter subscribers, coordinate with the monastery's webmaster, and provide data reports from that database to the development office and the community as needed. We maintain our historical records, and we have a memorial stone at the monastery cemetery that has a engraved plate on it for each of our deceased oblates. And then under purely administrative things, I help develop the annual budget along with the review and approval by the rest of our leadership triad, make sure we keep our software licenses up to date, send reimbursement requests to the business office, maintain our Oblate gift giving fund, which is created by donations given at the retreats. And we use it for, gifts to sisters on their profession dates or other events that are appropriate for gifts from the Oblate community. And last but not least, ensure that we have adequate supplies of candles and pins for the oblations. That kind of wraps my stuff up, and I will pass on to Jane.
So when I was originally preparing to lead the community through these really murky and at the same time exciting transitional years, a number of wisdom people, modern wisdom writers, I guess I will say, have helped to inform our approach to how we were going to do this. So first of all, Benedict of Nursia. So the rule, go back to the rule always. But there are others. So Meg Wheatley is a phenomenal organizational consultant, and the sisters many decades ago sent me to a program in Seattle that she was facilitating for a weekend. And I think that you will agree that her wisdom here was something that for me helped to sort of propel me forward. So in this new world, we make it up as we go along, not because we lack expertise or planning skills, but because that is the nature of reality. Reality changes shape and meaning because of our activity, and it is constantly new. We are required to be there as active participants. It can't happen without us, and no one can do it for us. Next slide. So my next inspiration came from Thomas Merton. We can no longer rely on being supported by structures that may be destroyed at any moment. You cannot rely on structures. They are good and they should help us, and we should do the best we can with them. But they can be taken away. And if everything is taken away, what do we do next? And that's really what we were facing. The structure that we've all understood and that we've lived with our monastic community is changing very, very rapidly. And then Parker Palmer, who is a well-known Quaker writer and wisdom person, because I know that, and this came to me in some reading that I did during the pandemic, because we were challenged by, is it community if we're not able to meet face to face? Is it the same thing? Well, maybe not. But this just clarified for me that we can make it work if we have the right attitude. Solitude does not necessarily mean living apart from others. Rather, it means never living apart from oneself. It is not about the absence of other people. It is about being fully present to ourselves, whether or not we are with others. And community doesn't necessarily mean living face to face with others or being face to face with others. Rather, it means never losing the awareness that we are connected. It is not about the presence of other people. It is about being fully open to the reality of relationship, whether or not we are alone. I also have used, and we've done a couple of book studies with some of these, with some of our leadership folks. I've also used some other resources in my planning and preparation. One of those is a series of books from the 1970s. I've had these a long time, Upon This Tradition. And it is a series of writings from the Conference of Benedictine Sisters, prioresses. And then a number of years later, Wisdom from the Tradition, which is a follow-up document, also from the Conference of Benedictine Prioresses. And what I learned from these two resources in particular was how to understand structure from an inside the monastery walls perspective, which allowed me to think through how do we translate that into a modern way with people that don't live inside the monastery walls. Specifically for community leadership, I also used this resource, which is Wisdom Leadership Reflections on the Ministry of Monastic Leaders by Ruth Fox. This is from 2003, and it was sponsored by the Federation of St. Gertrude. Excellent, excellent resource for anyone that is leading a community. And then a couple of secular resources that one is Always We Begin Again, which has been around for quite a long time, but it helps me to keep in mind, how do we translate this to people in their regular workaday lives? And then one that the Concilium used when they first got organized and started looking at what are some of the best ways to help guide our community. And this one is The Benedictine Rule of Leadership by Craig and Oliver Galbraith. So I know that we say often that we are making something new, but we are constantly referring back to those foundational resources that that have been there for, hundreds and hundreds of years, but also in the last 50-ish years. Okay, so for the lead coordinator, I kind of chunked my part into 3 sections. And the first is about relationships, networking, pastoral care. So this role is the liaison between the sisters and the oblates. Now, that doesn't mean that oblates don't have any relationship with the sisters. That's not it at all. But for kind of official and businessy things, I'm the liaison representing St. Gertrude's Center for Benedictine Life, as I'm requested to do so. Connect with and visit our dispersed communities on a regular basis. And that was certainly interrupted during COVID, but I'm hoping to figure out how to do that. To advise our dispersed communities as needed, that Senpecte role. So they're always open to give me a call and we can talk about any challenges or issues. We reach out, and this is one of Elise's primary roles, to work with members who are struggling, who are maybe growing distant, who we haven't heard from for a while, just to make sure that they are supported, and that if there's anything we can assist them with to re-enter community, that we can help facilitate that. And then to provide pastoral care to foster growth for the entire community in Benedictine life and values. The second category I called organizational leadership. So I meet monthly with the Monastery Ministry and Operations Council. I work closely with the Connections Information Coordinators to ensure that all functions of the community are being managed appropriately. Ensure that the manual is updated, as Debbie and Nadine both already mentioned, and then selecting attendees with Debbie and Nadine for regional, national, and international meetings. I guess I should also say that I chair I have a chair for the Concilium. The Concilium comes together at my request when we have some deep thinking that needs to happen in preparation for something that needs to take place. And then community rhythm. So my pieces in that community rhythm that we looked at last week, I prepare, and then with formation and connections coordinators, sort of a state of the Oblate community once a year. We do that in January, and it's on Zoom. It's difficult to travel in the Northwest in January. So we meet on Zoom. It's people have time to, after the report is presented to them, to provide input and discussion. I coordinate and facilitate the annual Oblate leadership meeting. That happens and will be happening in August each year at the monastery. And then we ensure that the annual Oblate Memorial Service is planned and scheduled, and that is in early November. And I participate and plan as needed for Oblate retreats. That is the sum of our presentation. What I think we'd like to do at this point is just open, people can unmute themselves, and we'll address any questions that you have. I would like to offer access for you to some of the resources that we've developed. And so if there's something specific that you would like to ask us about, this is the time.
This is just one quick one. For the books and articles you were referring to, would it be possible for us to have an actual list to see what they are and the titles and all?
Yes.
That would be very useful.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Can you talk about how the Oblate Council differs from the Concilium?
The Oblate Council has been in existence for, 15 years, maybe, Teresa? I don't remember. And that is one representative from each of the areas, the 9 dispersed groups who come together each quarter. It used to be that they would meet on site during a retreat at the monastery, but Zoom really it's more conducive to allowing people to schedule it, and our participation has been higher. The purpose of Oblate Council is to share I don't want to say health, but kind of the health of our area group. So their group, to help keep us abreast of what are they studying together. Is it working? Maybe they've discovered something new that they'd like to recommend. Sometimes people have information about a speaker series or something like that they can share. So they're enabled to share that with one another in a large group. And then also to keep us apprised of new guests or inquirers, to keep us updated about any of their, I'm thinking off the top of my head, Elise and everyone else jump in if you think of something else. If they have any members of their small community that are being challenged, maybe they've got health issues, they'd like to ask for prayer. We do have an online prayer list, a forum that we use also. It's a way of staying in contact with all of the area groups. It's also a way for them to share information with each other. So it may be that one group is having a challenge about something, and another may say, oh yes, we had that trouble too, and here's what worked for us. So it's a way for those groups to kind of connect and network with each other. Seeing each other maybe once a year isn't enough, right? And then the Concilium is that group of advisors who have agreed to take on some specific leadership tasks that require a bit higher level of commitment and experience in certain areas. So does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I was wondering, I know you probably can't give us a copy of the whole PowerPoint thing, but at least to get an email of a copy of the first diagram of the 9 dispersion groups.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. The presentations will be, I think, is this right, Teresa? They're being sent to people, right, that participate. But also, I'm looking at what we've put together here, and I think that we can create a resource document that can be available for download
Excellent.
from the sisters website. So, or we can send it, if someone requests it.
Jane, the
Yes.
entire presentation video is being saved on YouTube. And so the time that we had that diagram up on the screen was all recorded.
Oh, good. Okay.
I've also put in the chat a quick list of the 5 books you mentioned, although I didn't have details for the 2 that I don't own. So,
Okay.
but for those who wanted a list, it is in the chat.
Okay. Thank you, Nadine.
I have a question about budget.
Mhm.
You mentioned visiting the 9 dispersed communities. That takes money. The
Yeah.
Connect coordinator talked about developing the budget. How big is the budget and who funds your budget?
Our budget is part of the monastery budget. And correct me if I get this wrong, Teresa, but I think it's something like 0.001% of the monastic community's budget. It is pretty much fully funded, I think, by donations from Oblates, regular donations. And it has grown substantially in the last couple of years, although we haven't, I think that we're seeing that this year. We had some very lean years, of course, during pandemic. There wasn't any travel and things like that. Travel is resuming. So I want to say that at this point, our budget is around $5,000.
Yeah, it's 4,600 was what we submitted. I
Yeah.
don't know if we'll use all of that, but it was an estimate of what we would need. And the
Right.
good chunk of it is also for software services and the company that hosts our website.
Okay, all right. And then I have one more question. In the foreign Mason process, in the guest, the inquirer, the novice, and the oblate, is that done process in all 9 dispersed communities or only at the monastery? How do you do that?
So I can speak to that, Jane.
Okay,
So that process is essentially across our entire community. So anyone that's interested, and we get people referred to our Oblate website, our community through, there's actually a form on the sisters website where if somebody's interested in learning more about Oblates, they fill out the form, it's emailed to us, and then I respond by sending them some information, bibliographies, a little bit about the culture of our community, and a welcome letter.
Okay.
And so then our guests are basically, they can attend any one of those dispersed communities that's either geographically close to them or available to them online as a guest for a time. And then once people choose, if they decide they want to pursue this, they go to an inquiry day and become officially an inquirer, if that's what they choose to do. And continue to meet with those dispersed Benedictine communities. And then we just continue through that. So the whole process is kind of managed at the larger Oblate community level, but the dispersed communities themselves are also a piece of providing that information and formation to those individuals that are part of that.
okay, thank you.
You're
What
welcome.
is the sisters' website?
It's the Monastery of St. Gertrude website. Is it considered or called the Center for Benedictine Life now? Is that how you would find it?
No, their address is still www.stgertrudes.org.
Thank you.
So there is an
Thank
S on the
you.
end of Gertrude.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Suzanne has her hand up.
Suzanne?
First of all, I want to commend you ladies because you guys have your act together like I have never seen an Oblate group have their act together, man. I tell you. I'm an Oblate at Mount Angel, the men's monastery in Oregon. And I've been an Oblate for about 20 years now. But it's never been fleshed out like you guys haven't fleshed out. And I think they're over the last 2 or 3 years, they're finally starting to really kind of start getting organized, but they're still not where you guys are yet. And one of the things that I see that's lacking in a lot of groups is a sense of hospitality. I think if I could pick out the virtue that Benedict wrote about in the rule that I feel is the most neglected, that's the one. And it's horrible to say that. And the reason I say that is because I've seen people not be treated inclusively. I'll put it like that. And, to give you an example, one time I went to, we were renewing our oblations, and one lady who was there, she was a guest, I guess, under your kind of, she was kind of inquiring, but kind of between the way they do it in between inquiring and guests. And she was just kind of shut out of even being able to see it because she wasn't an oblate yet. I mean, seriously, I saw that happen. And it's like, and it literally, it's like a wall being brought down between that person and it's, you're not part of the club yet. And I wanted to ask, because I saw on your diagram about your hospitality team, what do you guys do? Because I haven't heard you guys, I mean, you've got it, that's great. But what all does that entail in that hospitality team? What do you guys do to make people feel welcome? I mean, the whole shebang.
The whole shebang. So beyond the 9 small communities?
Well, I would think I'd like to hear like both. I mean, the whole thing, like how do you begin to nurture someone from guest to oblate and in the realm of hospitality? I mean, how do you begin to, part of when you're hospitable to someone, that's part of how you make yourself open to them, to make yourself realize that yes, you can come with us, that you will walk with them and they walk with you, and that they feel safe and nurtured in that, even if they're not, worldly mystically wise, and they're not, levitating yet, and things like that. I mean, it's that kind of thing. I think a lot of people who want to find God and who don't go to church and haven't even had any basis in religion, and they need this. I feel like this is the door in for them. Something like this is even the beginning, the door in for them.
Yeah.
And how do we begin to nurture? I mean, just so you know, not only have I been an oblate, but I've also taught RCIA for 4 years and things like that. And one of the things I always did for the Lenten retreat was to take all of my group to a monastery. I take it to one of the Benedictine monasteries, the Trappist monastery, the Benedictine monasteries, and we did our Lenten retreat before their Easter vigil. And, it gave them, I wanted them exposed to religious life. Exposed, it's like, this isn't just for a certain little group of people who are holy and levitating and off in their little world. You are part of this. There is a notion, I think there's this separation. This is what I love about what's happening with you guys. There has always been this separation of go be holy for me, and I'm just going to sit here in my little huddle. And oblation is about being part of it. It's about it being part of you and you being part of it. And I guess I want to hear how you guys how you develop your hospitality so that people are drawn into that.
Can I say something about, this is Elise, something about from the area group perspective, I will get, say, someone's name or email from Debbie. She's gotten an email from someone and she passes it on to me. They're in the Lewiston area. I'm in North Central Idaho. And I will email that person and invite them to either email me, call me, and then I feel there's a certain responsibility of that person to also then step forward and do their part. And I've had people once in a while that do not follow through. They're invited to our meetings, invited to, this is what we're reading, you're invited to come, call me, do you have questions? I send them pieces of what's on our website about how does entry steps go. This is what you're expected to do. Because very much for me is a two-way street. And Benedict says they knock 3 times, and are they willing to be patient, to do their part? So I see what you're saying about wanting people to feel hospitable, or someone is being hospitable to them. But it's I don't babysit people, and I don't expect other people to. This is what we do. This is what you're welcome to do. You're welcome to come, and then it's up to them. And if they come, then we can follow through with more. I'll follow through a few times trying to connect with people. If nothing happens, then in that way, I feel like they've made their decision. So that's just on a real local level.
Tammy's got her hand up.
Thank you. I was just curious, what is in your connections for the journey, your community manual?
Well, I don't know if we've answered that other lady's. Have we answered your question enough? I'm sorry.
Not really, but that's not really, because that's okay. I just, I know mine's a little bit more complicated because it's a little bit deeper. No, it is, but I think, it's just, I just think that it's like, that's great that you invite them. And I agree, you shouldn't babysit them. And I know about Benedict saying not 3 times, but at the same time, I have seen, there's just little things, ways that you can make people feel included. And when I'm at the monastery and I'm on retreat there, and I know there's an anchor there, I really make an effort to help them with learning how to do the prayers, even if they don't ask. Just all those little things make them feel like, oh, they want me here.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? It's that kind of stuff.
So during retreats, we do have a team that's part of the hospitality team at the retreats. Sometimes it's one of the employees from Spirit Center, but they do set the books up. I'm not there that often, and I use a different book for Liturgy of the Hours than what the sisters use. And so I get lost. It's really critical that prayer be a smooth process. And so, yes, those kinds of things, if you're there on retreat, you are invited and encouraged to help with dishes, to do other things, to be participating in the community while you're there. At the same time, it's also communicated that you have responsibility for your own transformation and your own spiritual growth. And so we are walking with you. We will help you as best we can, but we're not doing it for you. And the reality is, some people come and they want it to be done for them. And they want to come and be there and be a sponge. And that's all. And that's not community. Full participation is you do your part. So I hear where your questions are coming from. We are an ecumenical community. The sisters are Roman Catholic, but the Oblates are ecumenical. And it doesn't matter to us. At this point, Christian is good enough. So if you are inquiring, if you want to know more, if you want to grow in your relationship with God, and you're starting to get that the more I know myself, the more I know God, then come and be with us. And and let's see how this goes. But part of every monastic community in my mind is a culture, and not everyone fits into every culture. So, for example, which slide was it? I don't remember. And I just lost my thought.
That's okay. I don't
It'll
want
come
to
back
take
to
the
me.
whole time here with my question, but I just, it's just something I think hospitality is really small things, almost like imperceptible things. I'm not saying that they shouldn't participate. My point is do they feel safe participating?
Mhm.
Do they feel welcome to participate? And that's I just want to know what you guys all did in
Sure.
relation to
And
that.
I
You have like
think
some
that-
game plan.
Right. I think
But
that
you've got such a great game plan with all the rest of it. It's just like, wow. So
that is part and parcel of it. So the charisms of St. Gertrude's, healing hospitality, that's one of them. So it's never far from our minds. Carrie.
And they are such a great role model for that. I have to say that when we walk in to the Spirit Center, when we walk in to the monastery, we feel welcomed, and we do have what we need provided for us, and people are happy to see us and happy to help. And I think that's just that spirit of hospitality that we're really trying to nurture within our small groups and as a whole group. And I think we kind of need to go back then to Cammie. Your question was about our connections to the journey.
Yes.
So that is essentially our manual. We used to, when people became a novice, they were handed a binder. It was a blue binder. When I started, it's been a white one. We're now, oh, and see there, Nadine had one.
Yeah, I can't get it in
and
focus though.
Okay. But it's become more of an online document, and we are definitely working our way through it as we're going through changes as our community. And so there are documents in there that basically talk about the process. There are things that talk about the culture of our community. There is a section, a bibliography on a wide range of authors writing about Benedictine spirituality, the rule of Benedict. There are things in there about the monastic community themselves, how long it's been there, a little bit of the history. We have in there more specific information about what does it mean to be an inquirer, and what is your role and what is our role toward you as you're an inquirer. What does it look like to be a novice? What is your role? What is our role with you along the way? There is a document that we just went through, I mentioned it earlier, that really spells out what it means to be a mentor. You know, we're not a spiritual director, we're not a counselor, we're a mentor along the way. And what does that look like? Where can you get some help for that process, etc.? So Nadine, help me out. What else am I missing here?
I'm looking at the table of contents here. You've covered most of it.
There's
There's like our vision and mission statements.
Yes.
You mentioned the history, several different articles on Lectio Divina and prayer.
Mhm.
There's administrative stuff, the chart of, how we're organized, what the area group coordinators do. I guess now we call them dispersed community coordinators, or I don't know, we're changing that technology or that terminology as we go. And there's a couple things about the monastery to make it a little more easy to connect with the monastery. The etiquette of what do we do when we visit? Where do we go? How do we behave? What are the expectations? And also what feast days they celebrate. And there's a list for those who want to pray the Psalms with the monastery, we've got a chart of which Psalms they do on which days, so people can do that. And that kind of, with what Deb added, that kind of covers it. But it's a living document, so there's always things being updated and added to it.
Super, thank you. That was very helpful.
I'd like to add something, if I could, kind of in follow-up to, I believe, Suzanne. Today, we're in a postmodern, non-Christian world when it gets right down to it, whether we like it or not. And many people today are looking for spirituality. And of course, every major religion in the world has spiritual people in it, and a very similar spirituality to our Christian spirituality. Also, as our churches seem to be going down the tube somewhat due to a lack of interest, and two, probably over the years, an excess of dictatorial things to people in a society that is completely different than it was 50 or 100 years ago. The thing that people are looking for is relationships. Lots of younger people I know, and I'm pretty old, want they want spirituality, but they don't know what it is. And so one of the things that when I meet somebody that makes some comment about that, rather than immediately trying to, and please don't take this wrong, but instead of immediately jumping into some organization, get to know the person, find out what their likes and dislikes are, find out what, if any, church history they have, find out problems, become a friend to the person. And then the person is much more likely to open up to you, and you could then say, or I would then say in this case, yeah, I have a bunch of people that I meet with that we discuss these things, and we're trying to travel this journey together. If you'd like, come. But I think the real thing, and there are churches in the country today, non-Roman, that are using welcome, invite, welcome, and can't remember what the third one is, but a person gets invited, the first thing you need to do is welcome them, make them feel at home. And I think anybody in this 3 pages or 4 pages of pictures here could probably do that just by personal thing and not by some great, large, and long tutelage in the rule.
Now, you're preaching to the choir, Don. Because that's largely what I already know and done. My thing was that I just didn't know if they did anything specific, because they had that on the diagram, that little hospitality team, and I didn't know what their, like, they had their coordinator, all that stuff outlined so clearly, and I didn't know if they had something that the hospitality team really focused on and did. That's what I was looking for, to see what they did. But you're preaching to the choir on that one. That's what I've been saying for a while.
Yeah, this is my first visit here, though I've been an Oblate for nearly 30 years.
But I completely agree with you.
And I also learned a long time ago that standing on the street corner and thumping your Bible doesn't do a whole lot of good. But there's other ways to get into that. I'll quit now, down off my soapbox.
And Dawn, I think that what you're describing, that one-on-one relationship building, for us probably occurs in those local dispersed communities as we get, somebody shows enough interest that they actually do want to meet with a group, and they start getting to know those people. So it's happening in our smaller groups rather than as part of the big overall structure.
Could I say a little bit maybe to help? I belong to the Queen of Angels Monastery in Mount Angel, Oregon. And our community, of course, is facing the closure of the monastery. And so we've been a very sturdy Oblate group for, since the 70s, and have gone through, maturation, so to speak, and assumed our own leadership probably about 5 years ago, and then went through Zoom. And now are facing, the fact that the last of the sisters are in fact leaving their beloved monastery and going to a assisted living. So what does that do for, where are we in all of that? What we've done in the last couple of years is develop what you guys call your dispersed groups. We have what we call reflection circles, which are groups of anywhere from 3 to 6 people that meet in geographic areas in our region. They also come to the monthly meetings at the monastery, but we see that the future of our group is really in these groups. And it sounds like that's what St. Gertrude's is doing, partly because of your geography. You're probably spread so far. But Yeah, community is what we're all about, and relationships, and we assign people mentors. And that's a really important thing, because then they become established with somebody and develop a relationship. And I still have coffee with the lady that I mentored a couple of years ago. You know, we still meet together. So yeah, I mean, relationships is what it's about, but I'm very impressed with what you folks are doing. And I think it's going to be helpful for us going forward, because your structure, you've already got it down, and we can pick and choose what we can use from your structure. So thank you.
We have in our oblates, this is kind of for Ray as a response. In our big oblate group at our monastery, and we're fortunate to have a large monastery about 50 miles from here, we have had other houses close, the house in Covington, for example, and the nuns moved to our place, and some of their oblate groups are still down there, but working with us. And the same with the monastery in the Oklahoma City, Tulsa area. I can't remember which it was. They still have an oblate group there, but that oblate group has transferred their basis, or whatever you want to call it, to our monastery. And I think then, you know, it kind of having a place to go, it has helped those groups mature.
Carrie, you had your hand up for quite a while and then put it down. Did you still have something you wanted to ask?
Carrie? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay. Well, Ray spoke, and then I started thinking again. I'm with Ray. I'm from Queen of Angels also, and if I wanted to go to, well, I can't go to St. Gertrude's because and did you say that it was only, your retreats are in person only? Is that what you're going to do moving forward?
Our retreats are always hybrid. We have a number of dedicated and very spiritual, wonderful people as members of our community that can't travel anymore. Yeah. And so we have made a commitment that we will always provide our retreats in a hybrid format, so that if you're a person that is unable to travel there, and sometimes that's a work conflict. St. Gertrude's isn't close to any large metro area. So our folks from Seattle have a difficult time getting there for retreats. You know, we have an oblate, I think Judy is on this call, that lives in Connecticut. So, you know, we and others that are too far away, but we're always offering them with an on-site option and a remote option. And that's part of the technical challenges that Nadine was mentioning earlier.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're doing a retreat this year at the Abbey, but I can't go. So I can't walk that far, and I have a muscle disease. So and it has passed. So anyway, so I appreciate that, because I've been oblate long enough. I don't want to get out. So, and I don't want to have to go to the Abbey. They are not looking at it. So
sure.
I wouldn't mind speaking a little to the challenges with hybrid retreats. It's one thing if you're all in one, you know, on site, and it's another thing if you're all online, as we are now. And those are not too bad. But when you're trying to do an event with some people online and some people remote, you know, or on site, we're running about half and half most of the time. It's very hard to help those groups feel connected, to have interaction between them. The people who are online miss out on some of the things that are done on site, like the worship in the chapel. So we've, at the same times that on-site people are worshiping, we've incorporated an online worship that's patterned on what's being used in the chapel to try to make it as similar an experience as we can. Our social time, we usually have an online and an on-site version going at the same time. And when we do like small breakout groups that report back on things, we alternate, reporting from an on-site versus an online group so that they're hearing from each other. And it's been helping to get some of that connection. The people on site don't tend to forget that there are online people quite as much as they did in the beginning. And it's helping, but it's still challenging. Sound issues particularly. So
Yeah.
So I see a couple of other hands. Jane Dalter.
Yes, just one question before we run out of time. Can you give us a quick overview of next week's and what we're all in this together is going to include?
We're all in this together.
That sounds like a Sister Teresa question.
It is, but I'm not sure if she's still here. It is going to be presented by Sister Barbara Jean and our spirit center, our retreat center director, Tim. And that is how is St. Gertrude's folding their employees and other friends of the monastery into the Center for Benedictine Life.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like Catherine Frick has her hand
Yes.
raised.
Thank you. I want to shift completely back. In your 4 columns about formation and oblation, there was a sort of almost like a footnote there where you said, after 1 year, they can discern whether they want to continue as oblates. Can you expand on that? Because, for us, you make your act of oblation and you're an oblate. It's not like it's,
The footnote had to do with people who were transferring their oblations from another monastery.
Are you sure? So,
Well, there,
But that's
what the footnote was.
Yeah, and we do discern through Lent. We are a discerning people as Benedictines, right? And so it's incumbent upon our relationships in community, our relationships with the monastery, that we discern throughout the year what is my commitment to this community. And from the beginning, our St. Gertrude's Oblates have discerned and made a recommitment annually. And sometimes people decide, I'm just not able to continue this. It may be life circumstances, it may be a number of other things, but it is, when I made my oblation in 1988, to me, in my heart and in my mind, it was a lifetime commitment. But our community has always been formed around, we continue to discern, we continue to grow and form ourselves and support each other. And it is important that we be really focusing on that through Lent. And at the end of Lent or right after Easter, we recommit ourselves to that promise.
Now, if I could probe a little further into that. We have our ceremonies in May, and those oblates who are present are asked to reaffirm their act of oblation. But those who, for one reason or another, cannot be physically present, that doesn't stop them from being considered oblates going on down. So I'm trying to get to the mechanics here because I hear exactly what you're saying. We have people who made oblation and we see them for 2 or 3 years and then we don't.
Right.
Some eventually come back, some don't. When we started doing hybrid meetings or some of that, we saw people coming back we hadn't seen for 10 years. But as far as we were concerned, they had always been oblates. In fact, unless you stood up there and said in front of God and the community, I disavow myself, we would consider you oblates, just probably not very good ones, but we would consider you oblates. So I was looking whether you had something more formal there, or what's going
Well,
on.
if
I
I
think
could
you're
speak,
asking a really
if I could
valid
speak to
question.
that.
Mhm.
So we do, when we come together for our commitment retreats, we recommit ourselves, we renew our oblations at that time together with the sisters in the chapel. Now, there are always going to be people who cannot physically be present at that time. And so then what happens with many of them is that at the local area communities, the dispersed Benedictine community meetings, when they come together, they will have a time where they can renew their oblations in that small group, their local group. And then they simply send me the information so I know who has made their oblation and who has not. What I'm hearing you say about that, I think it can be considered a lifelong commitment, but I think it's also important that we do renew that yearly and look at our commitment. Where are we right now with this community? And one of the things we are struggling with a bit is, what about so-and-so who hasn't renewed their oblation in the last couple of years, but they haven't said they don't want to be a member of this community anymore? And I think we're still sort of looking at what do we do in that case? We're not kicking them out. We're not kicking them off the
I didn't
island,
think
so to
you
speak.
did.
No. Yeah.
If they be, out the door because you didn't show up in time for prayer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it is a quandary I think we're dealing with, is to how do we, and one of the things Jane mentioned earlier is that she and Elise will actually reach out to some of the people that we haven't heard from in a while, just to make sure that we do know where they stand, and if they're in need, if there's anything we can do to reach out and help them.
We try to make sure that the ones that are consistently absent from our regular meetings are contacted by phone if possible. And, how you doing? Can we help you? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then we respond to however they respond. If for some reason we just don't hear from people for about 5 years, we list them on our as being inactive.
Yeah.
And we basically stop sending them the newsletter. Or not the newsletter, but the announcements of monthly meetings.
Okay. Yeah. It looks
Thank
like
you.
William Sabota has his hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to, this is partly to what Catherine was saying and what you were saying on there. There's another aspect of discernment, and that is the discernment of the individual, whether they still want to go through and do it. And one of the things I thought was interesting, and this is during when we were sort of having a dry run right before our oblation ceremony. So we're talking about the very day of the ceremony. One of the monks said, and just to remind us on this type of thing, is, it's been a long time. It's a long process you've gone through because a lot of it was delayed because of the pandemic. And he said, but it's not too late, even at this very moment, to say, maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe it isn't right for my heart. And don't feel bad. Don't feel pressured that you have to do it because you've done this type of thing. And then he made a couple humorous remarks and said, you've also got to have in your mind the right spirit or aspect, because becoming an oblate is not joining a social club.
Yeah.
And it's also not becoming a little monk or monkette. And I thought that was an appropriate way to make sure at the very last one, in your own, now through the discernment from the community, you might be able to see those behaviors, but also the person, sometimes there's a tendency to maybe delude oneself. And so I think that's a good thing when you're looking at the aspect of, it's not just from the community, it's within as well. And that gets to the whole spirit of being an oblate.
Yes, thank you.
Jeannie?
I have to unmute. I'm going to take this on a little different direction. I'm interested in how much uniformity versus uniqueness so I'm talking now about the dispersed communities. I'm at St. Benedict's in Minnesota, so we're a huge group. And there's no way to know everybody, 400 or more, are active oblates. Okay. And we have 153 sisters, I think, now still. And then there's St. John's over the way. So we have dispersed communities. I don't know that we name them that, but that's what they are. So like I'm in a group in the Twin Cities with a large group. Each group seems to naturally, I mean, it's a sociological phenomenon that groups always do, form their own culture, their own character. And as new members join or others drop out for sickness or death or whatever the reason, it changes the dynamic of the group. That's the nature of groups.
Sure. Yeah.
So what we do is we'll go on a theme of following Benedictine. We meet once I'm talking now just this one specific dispersed community that's part of the St. Ben's. We'll choose a book and we use that as a springboard. And it's really to talk about our own journey and our way of traveling together, actually as a support group. I know people don't like that term because it conjures up other thoughts, but it's a group that supports one another in our spiritual journey. We link arms together, we go to God. We're helping each other, and that's kind of the theme. So the question comes up, how much uniqueness, I want to say. I don't want to use the word diversity because I don't want it to mean ecumenism, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the flavor, the culture, the character of a particular one of the 9 groups of Cottonwood, sure. Let's just say, or yeah. So it comes to choosing, our question to ourselves is, should we always choose a Benedictine author or some writer that focuses on the Benedictine charism, since we are Benedictine Oblates? We're not Ignatians or Dominicans, we're Benedictines by choice and by our history. How much should we rely on Benedictine writers versus other theologians and writers that also could be good springboards? And I wondered if Cottonwood, how much you kind of oversee. I have no idea how big Cottonwood
so
is.
Our groups, Cottonwood's a tiny little place out on a prairie, far away from other things. So our groups do each have their own personality. They meet in different ways. They select what they want to study together. And I would say that probably most of the time they are reading Benedictine materials of some kind. But frankly, when I first started meeting in a group, there weren't very many Benedictine materials available. So that hasn't historically been always true. And I believe that there is much for us to learn from Franciscan spirituality and Ignatian spirituality. It's all helping us to find God. And so, the theme of our community sort of focus this year is we're all walking each other home. And to remember that, each group does that together. Those small groups, they become very close with each other. They're very supportive with each other. And that's all I can think of to say about that right now. But I think, so we have about 3 minutes left. Everybody. Yes, Elise. No? 2 minutes? Is that what you were saying? 2 minutes? Okay. There's a couple of other questions. Are they critical to our conversation now? Christine, go ahead.
Well, I want to thank you for having this discussion today, and I'm so glad I was able to listen in on it. I'm not an oblate. I won't be an inquirer. I'm a friend of St. Gertrude's Monastery, and I think I mentioned this at another time that I'm hoping that there will be resources opened up to friends of the monastery who can't or can't become an oblate.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm so impressed at what you are accomplishing and at the model that you have shared today.
Oh, thank you,
You
Christine.
certainly are shaping reality. Thanks.
Well, and I think that eventually, yes, I think eventually there's a place for oblation, right? But not everyone who is called to Benedictine spirituality or walking the way of Saint Benedict is called to oblation. So in my mind, the world is wide open right now, and there are many ways that we can look at more inclusivity, helping people to find the way to walk this way of Benedict with us at whatever level, or I don't even have words for it yet, but thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I should probably close this up.
Can I say one thing real quick? I just
Oh,
want to ask Catherine Fricks real quick. I'm sorry, this won't be a long answer. In Catherine Frick's point about, always being an oblate and not being able to do your renewal of oblation at the monastery, I did my one time I did my renewal at my parish. I wasn't able to get to the monastery. And I think just because someone doesn't show up at the monastery a lot shouldn't be saying they haven't done the renewal. That's all I'm saying. I was the only thing I wanted to add for that, because there is a way of doing renewal at your parish versus at the monastery.
Yeah.
That was it.
The closing prayer. We have been gifted with each other and called by the word of the Lord to act with justice, to love tenderly, and to walk humbly with our God. To walk humbly with our God. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone.